I've spent all my life on the far west coast of South Australia. I am a survivor of the Maralinga Emu Fields atomic bomb testing. But you know what? So is every other Australian. Black, white or brindle, you are all survivors of that atomic testing because uranium fell everywhere around Australia, including Tasmania. With all those plutonium tests that happened at Maralinga and Emu Fields, and there were hundreds of them, there's still little plutonium things all scattered all over the countryside out there that they did a clean up, but they're never ever going to clean that country. And the fallouts from those tests were deadly. Between the plutonium tests, the atomic tests, to this day, all through the generations, our genes changed with the radiation intake and everything. So there's, you know, there's cancers, there's birth defects, there's lots of things going on that are affecting us from those atomic radiation fallouts between the nuclear bomb and the plutonium. The plutonium is still out there. The ground is still contaminated from the radiation fallout. It's about 100,000 years before they can even think about saying it's clean. But they insist on doing it again. They'll never clean that plutonium up. There's little blobby things out everywhere on the ground out there. There's still restricted areas. They say come to Maralinga, you can do a tour, but they don't take you to the really bad areas. The whole lot is bad anyway, but they don't take you to where that plutonium is just scattered everywhere, and it's going to be there forever. So that land is lost to the Aboriginal people forever.
During the heyday, there was numerous atomic tests out at Maralinga. Some of the worst ones were, you know, from the 60s, 61, 60, 63, etc., where they had the above ground barrage balloon tests. So they had plutonium hung underneath a barrage balloon that was tethered up, and they detonated above the ground, and it resulted in the Gibber country there basically turned into a green a green stone now. It looks a whole lot like jade, a green colour, and obviously highly radioactive.
You know, the mind boggles that the government has done nothing about rectifying the mistake they made in bringing this building down from Maralinga, because everything at Maralinga was contaminated at the time, and that includes this building. This building here is right next to our childcare centre, and right next to the childcare centre is our kindy. So our children are at risk from whatever is going on with this building that has come from Maralinga, and it would be highly radiated. I don't understand why it was shut down, never to be used again, and never to be touched. Why isn't it removed? Why is it a danger to our children, our grandchildren over here? And we do have grandchildren attending that daycare centre, and the building still stands.
We were only in Ceduna the other day, and there was a sports building there that was made from material from Maralinga. It's now derelict and not in use, but the story is that a lot of the material there is radioactive. And during the 80s, there was a major clean-up there. Some of the local contractors from Cooper Pedy got contracts, and so when they're doing the clean-ups out there, the APS guards would only work during weekdays. It didn't work on the weekends, and so we obviously got to know the contractors and let them work on the weekends before they didn't go into certain areas. But what had occurred is that they went in areas they weren't. You know, salvaged a lot of scrap steel, took it to Adelaide, to the salvage yards down there, and you know, fast forward a number of decades, and the RAF were down there looking for steel to make targets out of, and they come across these, you know, big chunks of steel, 50 mil thick, you know, 6 or 8 metres long, already targets, made into targets, and they thought, well, this is ideal. Said to the proprietor of the scrapyard, oh look, don't get rid of them, we're coming back to get them off you. And it was during the discussions with his colleagues that someone mentioned that they could be from Maralinga. And so he took a Geiger counter to test them, and they went off the dial, so they didn't go near them. And so all these things were transported through townships and cities and stuff without people's knowledge. So that's not a good thing.
Yeah, Ceduna's known as the cancer capital of Australia. Every second person will die of cancer in this place and surrounds. But you ask anyone, even the young kids, what do you think you'll die from? Oh, cancer, everyone else is. That's the general thoughts, that it'll be cancer that takes them all out. And that is because when Maralinga went off, the poisonous radiation fallouts didn't stay there. They came all the way down here as well. And because it's sparse in between us and Maralinga, Ceduna's the most populated town around. We've got the most people that are known to be affected by cancer, dying of cancer every day. We can hardly bury one person without another one dying in this town. At times they're lined up waiting to be buried. But the cancers would have been caused from the fallout from Maralinga. This building right next to our kindy is not helping. I've got no thyroids, and we all know that the thyroids is the first defence against radiation poisoning, but I can't prove it. So there's a lot of thyroid problems in this town. There's mostly with the women, and the heart problems is with the men. There's young people, 45 years old, getting triple heart bypass. And there's just, you walk around this town and see how many men have just had triple heart bypasses. It's just unreal. So everything is starting to happen from everything that happened before Maralinga, Emu Fields, everything is starting to happen around Ceduna now too.
When you look at the Senate committee inquiry into the Jukin Gorge disaster, in the wash-up of that inquiry, it was made evident that what has happened in relation to native title committees, the prescribed body corporate set up on the native title, was that they relied heavily on the grassroots people to get them their native title in the first instance, so the people connected to country with the stories, etc., got native title for their communities, and then the boards are set up, and then under the board, a lot of those people have been pushed out by the younger entrepreneurial type people, and so what that means was that there's been a lot of mining agreements entered into that occur over sacred sites.
Yeah, native title is one of my pet hates. I don't hate a lot of things or a lot of people, but that one I do. You remember when Mr. Mabo won his case in court, the Australian government scrambled to invent native title. And it wasn't their right to give me native title. That was given to me at birth. That's my rights. But native title has split families. The government has threatened them, if you don't make agreements with miners, we'll come back and we'll take the land anyway and you'll get nothing. But what people have got to realise is that you can fight this. Native title is evil. It's there to destroy families. Divide and conquer is alive and well within native title. And when the damage is done within families, that damage is there forever. You've got the older people saying, no, don't destroy country. You've got the younger people saying things like, but if we don't join them and go with them, we're going to miss out. We're not going to get any money. They don't realise that the richness is not within money, it's within the land and the culture. Australia likes to brag that they don't have any nuclear weapons, but we are responsible for nuclear weapons being elsewhere. And Australia likes to say we're under the umbrella of the Americans. Umbrella there like that. The Americans, if anything happens, the Americans are going to look after America. Australia's just a secondary place, although I think this is the 51st state of America.
We're currently standing at the top of Lake Hart North. It's from a cultural standpoint very significant for Coolgardie people and other groups to the west and north of us. There's a number of sites recorded around the outside of the lake, and the fence utilised the area as a live firing ground, and the northern part of the lake is used as an impact area for high explosives, aeroplanes and payloads, etc., etc. One of the things I know that definitely happened was when they had those tests, those aeroplanes had flown through the clouds, and those aeroplanes were flown back to Woomera onto the airstrip, washed down, and then towed off out to the west of the airstrip and put in a creek. And the planes was run over with a dozer, and then the creek, sides of the creek was pushed down over the top of them. So that's still there today, buried. But the thing to remember with Woomera and testing is that there are still a lot of remnant rockets and defence ordnance lying around all over the place. And the thing to remember too, back in the day, the Woomera Privet area went all the way to Lake Torrens. And then in the 80s, when Olympic Dam was being developed, they shortened the WPA, so it went around the mine. One of the things that is impacted on Coolgardie cultural heritage is the Indenture Act, 1982, which covers Olympic Dam, and also includes the Stewart Shelf, which is a vast area. You know, the BHP now own Carapatina. They own obviously Olympic Dam, but they're now developing Oak Dam. In relation to the stories around that during the heyday that Defence would dump radioactive waste, Defence generated waste into the sea and into areas around Woomera. Again, I don't know whether that's true or not, but given what happens nowadays is that that's exactly what occurs. In the instance of Carapatina mine, the ore is just over the threshold for export, and so they refine it on site. And so the uranium that they take out of the ore is just thrown into the tailings dam at Carapatina. And so, you know, those work practices probably started back then and they continue on today.
Most of these companies, like BHP, even Iluka out here, they don't belong to Australia. Their mother countries are overseas. They are overseas countries that are here, raping our country. You take what happened at Olympic Dam. They cleared all this land before they even had got the okay to expand. I went up there for a protest, you know, just a peaceful protest. And the police were going to arrest one young fella for cutting a few leaves off to make a smoking fire for vandalism, environmental vandalism. And we just looked at him and said, what the hell is that out here? You didn't give a damn about the animals, snakes, lizards, anything, when they just cleared, and they got the cheek to call us environmental vandals. It's Olympic Dam should never have been okayed. Honeymoon. The Coolgardie people have suffered right throughout the South Australian west coast here because of man's greed for more uranium, more uranium. You know, when are they going to learn? They can't eat, drink, or breathe uranium, money. But you know that water that BHP uses out of the Great Artesian Basin, they get millions of litres per day free of charge. They are not charged a single cent. Yet if I go and water restrictions, I go and water my garden the wrong way with a hose or something, I'll get a fine. What is wrong with this government that doesn't realise that water is, we're the driest state in the driest continent in this world, and they are still abusing the water rights, really, our rights to drink. They're still abusing it by allowing something like BHP to extract all that mining, different miners, to extract all that water and then give it back to us as tailings dams.
You know, just to the north of us is Olympic Dam, one of the biggest uranium mines in the world, and one of the things that's always been a concern to Coogera people is that where does that product end up at the end of the day, the uranium? We often think whether, you know, one day are we going to get that back in the form of a atomic warhead or something, and you know, the last thing that we'd ever want was for material from our country used to kill people. You know, we don't want that. So not far from where we are, you know, less than a K to the west is what they call the IB building, and it is from that area they, in the 40s, 46, around that time, they set up what they call the rain centre line. And so the rain centre line is as the name infers, is a straight line that goes basically from Woomera to the Western Australian coast, and it's roughly the distance from London to Moscow. And so it was during the time of the Cold War that a lot of these rockets were developed and tested here in Woomera. So the alarming thing about weapons and munitions being manufactured in Australia is that at some point they'd want to test those munitions, and immediately what springs to mind is the Woomera Prohibited area, is Coogera country, and in recent times, particularly with the Saab incident, we just need to make sure that things are done in a transparent manner, and Coogera are involved in looking at areas that they're going to use to test these weapons and munitions on. Because no one wants to be going out there and finding unexploded ordnance. You know, it's a terrible thing having to be a senior custodian of country that is used for this, because ultimately our young people are going to be out there. It's only in recent years that they've fenced the tailings dams. Prior to that, they were like kangaroos and emus and particularly birds fell victim to the tailings dams. When there was, you know, large rainfall events to the north at Lake Eyre, a lot of the migratory birds would see water, and so they would land on the tailings dams. BHP's reputation with tailings dams is not good. You only have to look at what happened over in Brazil, and they've been held accountable for that. So now BHP have the Carapatina mine, and so we have heard that there's been issues with their tailing dam as well, particularly when it rains. The main pumps seize up with mud, and at one point they come close to overflowing. And so our concerns with that is that the tailings dams will end up bursting, and that all the waste will flow into Lake Torrens. And so they are processing the ore at Carapatina, and the reason they do that is because there's uranium in it, and it's just over the threshold for export. And so the radioactive ore is just thrown into the tailings dams.
At the moment, there's a Southern Launch is a space company that wants to do testing, supposedly, you know, sending satellites into space and pharmaceuticals in space, but they also want to test weapons. They want to, a French company wants them to test guided missiles. They've sent off one rocket already called High Impulse from Germany. The ADF is involved big time with them. Now the Southern Launch CEO, Lloyd Damp, he worked at Woomera for 13 years in weapons design. And now they're here. Did he design those weapons at Woomera just to send them off from our country to test them? Why aren't they using Woomera? What's the big secret about that? That range has gone into join up with the Woomera protected area. So that is one hell of a slice of South Australia that will be closed off forever to, you know, people like me who are going out there all the time looking after country, teaching my grandchildren, teaching them how to survive, how to respect, all of that, that'll be closed off to us. So I will be fighting on that front big time to keep it open for us, not for destruction. And we need to protect those animals and birds. They got no voice. They can't speak for themselves. So humans really must take responsibility, and the Australian government must take responsibility to protect all living things on this planet. The English government did not need to test those bombs at Maralinga and Emu Field and Montebello, because that was after World War II. Hiroshima and Nagasaki had already been blasted, so they knew what a bomb could do, but they went ahead anyway. They didn't care whether there was people on country, they didn't care about the animals, they just went ahead and did it. They didn't care about the water supply, which is absolutely crucial out on country like that. They didn't care about the plants, you know, nothing. So long as they got their way in testing a bomb, they knew what it was going to do anyway. It really is a weapon of mass destruction. And now we have a rocket range not far from here. And it's all hush-hush on what they're going to be doing too. But they sent a German rocket off high impulse when I was on country there, and they said, oh no, it's not going to hurt you or anything, but they weren't supposed to send anything off when people are on country. But they just, there we go again, Maralinga again. They didn't care.
So, you know, you've heard South Australia's been referred to in the media as a defence state. And it's definitely shaping up to be that. You know, back in the days, 40s and 50s, we had the British atomic test out at Maralinga. And from that time on, the Woomera pivot area had been used by defence for a whole range of things. And although, you know, the people out there in the Western Desert suffered a lot from the British atomic tests, the Cookera people in this area around Woomera really have still been impacted on by defence activities all those years later. It really hasn't relented for the Cookera. And with having the Olympic Dam to the north of us, we've got just over the road here at the range head, Evetts Field, there's 10,000 drums of contaminated soil from Lucas Heights. They were moved there in the late 90s for a couple of years, and guess what? They're still there. And these are the sort of things that draw people to this area to store reactive waste, because in their eyes, you know, tests were done at Maralinga, centre of operations for all that was Woomera. We've got a huge uranium mine to the north of us. We've got 10,000 drums of contaminated soil. During the British atomic test, there was something that was developed called the ding notices, and so that controlled what it was that media could say about that project. And to that end, Aboriginal people are still impacted by that type of media restriction, particularly in relation to Olympic Dam and the Indenture Act. There's a lot of things that goes on behind closed doors that we don't get to hear about, and we only see what happens on the ground from the effect of those conversations behind closed doors.
Australia is just wide open, like the doors are open for anybody to come in. We want to test our bombs. French company want to test guided missiles. What better targets out in our country here than our sacred sites? It's really frustrating.
One of the things that this AUKUS agreement is going to bring to the table for Australians is that within that structure, there's no mechanism for consultation with Indigenous people, and so what that means is there's no prior informed consent. And to that end, I mean, Indigenous people have always suffered by that. And what I mean, you know, we're never spoken to about what's going to happen. They just go ahead and do it. And you know what that means for that's going to be translated across the board for all all Australians, and so it's going to give an insight to how Aboriginal people are treated for the rest of the nation to have a think about the effect on them and on us all. And the issue being with the SARB issue was that the Australian law was that weak that we had to revert to international law to get some accountability of SARB, selling on their munitions to Australian Defence Force, and yeah, so we use international law rather than Australian law to make them clean up their mess, basically. The Australian Nuclear Power Bill of 2023, which has been put together by the Albanese government, and there's drafting within that states that Australia will accept United Kingdom and United States nuclear waste, and we've already got a whole range of nuclear waste that's occurred during the British atomic test at Maralinga. We don't want any more, please. Just to the north of us here of Woomera is Olympic Dam, and one of the unique things the mine owner or the people that operate and own the mine have is the Indenture Act from '82, and there's certain provisions under that act, and one of them is that they don't really have to apply with the '88 Heritage Act. The other odd thing about it is that if there's a Aboriginal site or object that's found, it's not the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs that is consulted, it's the Minister for Mines and Energy, and so there's that disconnection there with the Heritage Act as well. The thing about it is there's a lot of secrecy around it, and we will probably never know, sadly. Obviously the effects on Aboriginal people from the areas, people are still suffering those effects today and will continue into the future. You look at the dispersal of the cloud and ash from those atomic tests. They went everywhere basically around Australia. I recall hearing someone talk about on the eastern side of Australia where children back in the day will still have milk as part of going to school, and they detected radioactive fallout in the milk. Adelaide, some of the tall buildings there had air monitoring devices, and that they were spiked. I remember as a small child sitting at the kitchen table with my nana and her friend, and she was a shearer's cook, and she happened to be based at Tarcoola at the time, and they had sheep penned up ready for shearing the next day. They started, but they couldn't continue because the wool had this black soot over them, and then the shearers and everyone on the station become sick. They had sore eyes and was vomiting and diarrhea, and that was because the cloud went over them. And so you can imagine the health effects that had caused. You think about, well, what happened to those sheep? Did they get in the food chain? The wool, where did that go? So it just continues on.
Now, over the years with various organisations that I've been involved with, I've learned there's something like 700 to 900 plutonium bombs were tested, and at least 12 nuclear bombs. That's a lot of radiation poisoning put out on our country. But, people don't know about that. When I went to Vienna, 150, 120 nations, never heard of Maralinga. I was gobsmacked how so closely tight the British and Australian governments kept that secret. And one of the people in Vienna come up and said to me, I thought the Australians, Aborigines, were the best looked after people in a conquered land. I said, no. I was a bit shocked with that too. So the government's obviously put that out there, how well they look after us. We don't even have the right to say no. So, that's not looking after us, that's degrading us all over again. We cannot protect our country, or our culture, or our dreaming. The government keeps stomping on us at every move we make. And we need people, which I've got a lot of good people helping me all the time, to protect our country, because if we protect country and culture, then we protect ourselves. We lose country and culture, we lose us.